We just got a bombshell update on the Texas Solar bankruptcy story. After we published our report on Texas Solar's bankruptcy filing last week, a company executive reached out to SolarSurge with insider information. And if he's right, it could mean several other Texas contractors are at risk of failing soon. I'm going to be breaking it all down in today's video. The smarter way to go solar. All right, now in today's video, we're doing a follow-up to a video that we published last week about Texas Solar filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Now, after that video went public, one of the former executives of Texas Solar reached out to us with some insider information to help shed some light on exactly what led to the company's failure. All right, now the first thing we need to understand is how the deal was structured between Texas Solar, the leasing company, and its investor. So Texas Solar was operating as the installation company or the developer. They were the entity that was doing the physical work to acquire the materials and install the solar equipment onto homeowners' homes. However, they were using a new financing vehicle called the Green Lease, or the Texas Green Lease. And so Texas Green Lease Company, or Green Lease Company, was a separate entity from Texas Solar. And this was the entity that was providing financing for these installation projects, and ultimately the entity that Texas Solar's customers, the homeowners, were making their payments to. And then finally, there was a private investor. The private investor owned the Green Lease Company and was also a creditor to Texas Solar. So they had cash on loan to Texas Solar prior to the bankruptcy filing. In fact, it was the calling of that loan that prompted Texas Solar to seek Chapter 11 protection. So why was Texas Solar selling solar leases with the Green Lease Company as opposed to just selling direct solar, either with cash or with a loan? Well, one reason is because you can now sell solar to homeowners that would not otherwise qualify for the tax credit. It could be a homeowner that has low taxable income or no taxable income. It also could be borrowers with poor credit that would not otherwise qualify for a traditional solar loan or for a home improvement loan. But more on that later. Another advantage is that you can get a lower monthly payment with a solar lease compared to a solar loan. So if you're selling solar on a bill swap basis, which is a lot of what you're selling when you're selling solar, especially on a lease, is you're saying, hey, Mr. Homeowner, right now you're paying, let's say $200 a month for your electric. If I switch you to the Green Lease, I can lower your monthly cost to only $150 per month without you having to put anything down out of pocket. And then of course, finally, it was the larger commission potential. And from the reports I'm hearing, the average commission for a Texas Solar project sold with the Green Lease averaged about $7,000 per household. By the way, if you haven't seen our previous video on solar loan versus solar lease, go back and watch the previous video where we break down this comparison in more detail. Now, the Achilles heel of this lease structure, though, is that the system owner or the developer has to be able to monetize the solar tax credit. Now, those of you who've been following the channel for a while, you know that there's a 30% federal tax credit for a qualified renewable energy investment, including a solar power system. And so if the homeowner that has the solar panels installed on their roof, if the homeowner is leasing the system, they don't qualify and they can't claim the tax credit directly. Whoever actually owns the system can. So in this case, and the way that their deal was structured, Texas Solar was the owner of the system at the time of install, and they then had to claim and monetize the tax credit. All right, now here's where things start to get funny, because my understanding, and as it was reported to me, the way that Texas Solar was calculating the tax credit on its projects was not the cash cost of installing the solar equipment and the labor, but they were calculating the system cost on the total of lease payments over the entire term of the lease, which could be 20, 25, or 30 years. So to give you an example, a typical 10 kilowatt system installed in Texas could be purchased for $30,000 retail price from a homeowner. So if a homeowner had cash on hand, or if they had to just get a loan, like a home improvement loan or a home equity loan from the local bank, a homeowner could purchase a full 10 kilowatt system installed for $30,000. Now, that same 10 kilowatt system financed through the Green Lease Company would have a total lease payments of anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 over the entire 30-year term of the lease. And so the way Texas Solar was calculating these tax credits allegedly was not based on the $30,000 cash price for install, but on the $100,000 total lease payments over 30 years, meaning that a $30,000 cash system which would typically yield a $9,000 tax credit, was instead being claimed as a $100,000 lease payment, total lease payment basis, which would then yield a $30,000 tax credit. So in other words, the entire amount of the cash purchase price of the system was being claimed as a tax credit because it was being claimed based on this leased structure using the total of lease payments over 30 years as the cost basis. Okay, here, let me give you another example. A main panel upgrade. Now, a main panel upgrade typically costs about $2,000 extra on top of a solar installation. Those of you in California will be very familiar with this. A lot of times when you add that additional solar power source into your home, you have to upgrade the home's main electrical panel. Well, instead of that being a $2,000 one-time cash add-on, the way that was being calculated was based on $17 a month times 360 months over the course of a 30-year lease, which was a total of $6,120 over that entire lease term. And that's what was being used to calculate the tax credit. So kind of funny here, because when you look at solar financing with a loan, you're not allowed to look at loan payments over time or how much interest is paid on the loan as your cost basis for establishing the tax credit. It's whatever the purchase price is for the system on day one. That's your cost basis, and that's what you use to calculate the tax credit. So a little bit of funny accounting here, if you ask me. So why couldn't Texas Solar find a buyer for its tax credits? Well, here's the thing. The tax credits could be rejected by the IRS, and they need third-party insurance. Now, I'm being told by the insider that the tax credit market value is anywhere from 60 cents to 90 cents on the dollar, depending on who the counterparty is, who the entity is that's issuing the tax credit, i.e. who's the project developer, and what is the recapture risk. Or again, what's the risk that the IRS is going to reject the calculation of the tax credit. So why would the IRS reject the calculation of the tax credit? Well, one simple scenario would be if the homeowner, if the borrower stops making payments prior to that 30-year lease term. Let's say the borrower stops making payments in year 2. And the tax credit on that system was calculated based on a 30-year lease purchase term, but the homeowner stops making payments in lease 2. The tax credit associated with that system could be discounted in value or rejected by the IRS. And let's be honest, a lot of the homeowners that are signing up for this program, these are homeowners with marginal credit. You're talking about no FICO leases, could have default rates anywhere 10, 12, up to 18%. So there's going to be a large pool of homeowners that fall into this category of the lease going into default within the first 5 years of the system. And so again, if your tax credit is being calculated based on total lease payments over 30 years and the homeowner makes payments for less than 5 years, the IRS may look at that and say, hey, you've overclaimed the tax credit value here, so we're going to have to adjust that down accordingly. Now, I'm told that towards the end of operations, Texas Solar was selling over 100 of these green leases every week, and they were beginning to pare down the terms from 30 years to 25 down to 20 years, presumably in hopes that the IRS would accept them as a more fair calculation based on those shorter lease terms. But that's a problem, because the way that Texas Solar and other contractors that are engaging in this model, the way that they're actually funding themselves and funding their construction operation is assuming that they're able to sell and monetize those tax credits on a short-term basis. And that begs the question to me is the core construction business here even profitable without artificial government incentives? And the answer I got from the insider is absolutely not. In fact, the entire model relies on the ability to generate, capture, and monetize these tax credits, and to be able to do so on a short-term basis, because it's the tax credits themselves that the contractor is selling on the market to then raise the cash to actually cover its operating costs, like labor, permitting, administration overhead, and of course, purchasing of the solar equipment and the solar materials. And this is where Texas Solar got itself into trouble, because the same investor that owned the green lease company had lent Texas Solar money, allegedly lent Texas Solar money based on the anticipation that they were going to be able to raise cash by selling these tax credits that were being generated But when a round of selling this tax credit failed and Texas Solar didn't have another buyer lined up in time, that's when they had to file for bankruptcy protection because they couldn't pay the investor back their loan. So I would say this, and my insider was concerned that other Texas companies may fall into the same problem, is that if your solar installation business is reliant on generating tax credits through the sale of lease or TPO solar products, if those tax credits cannot be monetized, or if they cannot be monetized at the level that you're assuming that they can be, then it could put your business on very shaky ground in terms of your survival. I also question the viability of even larger companies like Sonova and Sunrun. Or even if you look at the situation that Solar City found itself in prior to being bailed out by Tesla, they had also sold a number of leased solar power systems, and although they had accrued a number of tax credit on their books, that cash was not accessible. It was not cash that could be immediately demanded, and therefore they found themselves in a situation where they did not have the necessary cash flow to sustain operations. So if you're a solar company out there and you're in a similar position dependent on monetization of tax credits, you may need to think about how you can diversify your activity. And then of course another question is, will the incoming administration in Washington be as friendly towards the calculation of these solar tax credits? Again, I've never heard of this where you take the total of lease payments or total of finance payments and use that as the cost basis for calculating tax credit. Whenever I've done solar financing using more traditional loans, it's very clearly stated that the interest paid over the course of the loan cannot be considered as part of the cost of the system. That's on you as the borrower. You set up whatever financing you want, but if you have to pay interest over time, that cost is on you. But whatever the original purchase price is, that's what you use to calculate your cost basis for the investment tax credit. Whereas what I'm hearing now in these reports is that Texas Solar is claiming up to 30 years worth of lease payments as cost basis for the system, and therefore generating what some might consider an inflated value on the tax credit. So I guess time will tell as the new administration comes in and we see what, if any, change to solar, the solar investment tax credit or solar policy in general might be coming down the pipeline. By the way, this reminds me of the 2008 mortgage crisis all over again. I mean, number one, you just have greed. You've got organizations that want to sell a lot, they're generating high commissions, and they're not really thinking about the long-term best interests of the borrower. Of course, you have a lot of these Wall Street guys that come in with creative financial engineering.
Wall Street loves to use confusing terms to make you think only they can do what they do.
So everything looks great on paper, everything sounds great, and there's low monthly payments, of course, until it all blows up. And then the worst thing about it is a lot of times you're dealing with homeowners and borrowers here who are those that have lower income or have marginal credit and couldn't qualify for a more traditional low interest fixed rate solar loan financing. So this has been an update based on insider information. What went down at Texas Solar? What led to Texas Solar's demise? And are other solar businesses at risk that use this leased ownership or TPO model where you have to generate and sell tax credits in order to keep the business afloat? Of course, folks, if you're getting good value from the videos that you watch here on Solar Surge, make sure you give us a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. That way, as we have new videos like this coming out, it'll come up in your feed and you can stay up to date with everything. Of course, if you're in the process of looking at different solar power or battery storage options for your home, if you need to get a price quote for solar, or maybe you already have a price quote, you just need to get a comparison to make sure that you're getting the right equipment, getting the best deal. As always, you can feel free to reach out to us on the link below here. Set up a call with a Solar Surge expert, or just use the free online quote tool so you can see how much solar and battery storage costs in your area. Well, that pretty much wraps it for today's video. I thank you all for spending some more time on the Solar Surge channel. And as always, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.